So we'll go ahead and get started. I know there's some people still lingering a little bit in the other room, but we're already a little bit short on time. We have about 30, almost 40 minutes. Thank you for coming. We'll let people kind of trickle in. My name is Paul Lambert. I'm with the Wheatley Institute here at BYU. And run the Religion and Society Initiative, and really grateful to be here with my friends, and that's a true statement. We're friends for many years, not just friends from the last day. We decided when we were putting this conference together that, as Brett said this morning, one of the things we wanted to do with a lot of the sessions is what does this practically look like? We talk a lot about religious freedom, pluralism, but what does it look like in our everyday contexts? And we thought it would be really good to look at what this looks like in the workplace and in business environments specifically. Now, I'm happy to have this bias. I have a bias about this because this is where I spent a lot of my professional time before BYU. I was full-time consulting on this very topic with these very people over the years. And so I think we have a lot to learn. I'll just frame this really quickly, and then I'll introduce our panel members and let them talk about this. Why business? Why are we talking about this in a business context? A lot of people think, well, religious freedom, plural, that's a policy issue. That's a church issue. I think it is those things, but it is absolutely a business issue. It's a workplace issue. And the reason for that is a couple of things. I'll highlight a few. We spend most of our time at work. Work is also probably the most diverse place that we'll encounter. It's not guaranteed, but it probably is the most diverse place to encounter. It's not our churches. It's probably not where we live. It's not, for BYU students, it's not BYU. It's probably where we go to work. That's where we're going to encounter the most diversity. We also have a common cause in a workplace that allows us to coalesce around something. It allows us to recognize that if I support my colleague that's different than me, that's good for them. It's also good for me because we have that common cause. So the workplace ends up being a really powerful medium to experiment and experience the benefits of pluralism, the benefits of religious freedom. That's why I think business can be such a powerful, that's one reason why business can be such a powerful tool. And that's why we have these experts here and practitioners here to help learn from that. So who are these three folks? So right here we have Adam Smith-Cairns. Adam is from ServiceNow. He's a senior project and marketing manager at ServiceNow. We have Sumreen Ahmad. Sumreen is at Accenture. She's a global change management lead. And then we have Shawn Trotter from Dell Technologies, and she's a vice president there at Dell. None of these people do religious freedom, religious pluralism, or interfaith, or any of these things as their full-time job. They all have jobs within the company that are very demanding, but they've all taken time in their careers over the past many years to make this a reality. Yes, because they are people of faith and they want to be able to live according to their identity of faith, but also because they know that this is really important to others and their companies. So on a personal note, I will just say you won't find three greater people. They're just wonderful people, and I'm so thrilled to have them here on BYU's campus and that we can learn from them. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to first turn to Sumreen to talk, then we'll turn to Shawn, and then we'll talk to Adam, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So Sumreen, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the privilege of being here. Paul has been an incredible partner in taking the goodness of what we're trying to do and really bridging with communities like this. So I personally feel it very privileged to be here. I remember being here 5 years ago, and boy, the conversation just continues to evolve. Just keep me honest, we have until 4:50 with this, just timing-wise?
Until 15.
Okay, so just in the spirit of time, I think we were joking, I feel like I've been doing this work in corporate for over 20 years. You'll see what you'll get across the panel is just different stages and phases of where people are at. And so what I want to share is more of the macro view of faith in the workplace. And so if we go to the first slide, you'll see many of the perceptions, and I won't drain, political, polarizing, sensitive, uncomfortable, gray, complex. And what's interesting about this is that I originally had put this together thinking this is what Accenture felt like in 2005. And for a long time, it was more of the time and place and where we were as an organization. But what I've come to actually appreciate is that there are organizations that still feel this way. There are people who still feel this way. And so there's two kind of sides of this coin. First, in the recognition that in our workplaces, we are dealing with 6 generations of people. This is the first time we've had that many generations. And when you look as a generalization, you'll look at the first 3, kind of the most senior down to the senior millennials, that were raised to think that race, religion, and politics have no place. And so culturally speaking, it was just something you compartmentalized and did on your own time. Soon came the junior millennials, and then the Gen Z and the alphas, who have quite a different view. And again, I'm generalizing because there are people within. And so when I put this slide up, there may be, people in a room who still think this, and there are some people who are like, what are you talking about? So the generational workforce difference is a really key point to take into consideration in terms of what's in the realm of possibility, in terms of what you can do or how hard or how easy it might be. The second component is the focus on culture. And so again, I feel very fortunate. I work for a company that is not just very mature in the culture. I do culture and change management, so I can say that. But also when considering whether DEI is a thing or just integral to the way you run your organization. So what's interesting, and again, is in 2005, religion wasn't necessarily seen as an inclusion priority, but frankly, a lot of the other inclusion priorities weren't either. Women got together out of just necessity, and we used to get together and do manicures together to just kind of commiserate about the balance of trying to raise kids and have a career. That's what an ERG was in 2005, right? And so, but we laugh about it, but the reality is now it's a key driver to metrics, to gender equality. And when I look at that, and then we moved into about 2015, where it became bring your whole self to work, and people were really focused on organizational culture and realizing that when you unlock your talent and the human side of your organization, there's so much possible. We might have overcommitted, perhaps. I mean, that's where you see the pendulum swinging. And now we're in a time and state where we understand the need to unlock human potential, especially in the context of generative AI and what the impact of artificial intelligence is going to do. So there's that conversation. But also recognizing that we can no longer ignore the diversity of our workforces. So a byproduct is you're going to talk about faith in the workplace. I just caution to say that your organizations and businesses in general are in varying places, whether because of the workforce demographic or because of the focus on culture. There still needs to be an environment where people realize that you've got to foster an environment, because no matter who you are or where you are in your career, people want to be seen and heard and belong, and that's really how you're going to unlock the potential. So if we just kind of go, I'm going to have to go a little quicker. Religion is important for a lot of reasons. You can look at a legal lens on this. I think we're in the right room. We don't want to create an environment where someone can come back at you for not accommodating for their needs. And similarly, from an employee standpoint, the more you can foster an environment of belonging and psychological safety, the more you're likely going to. And the transactional cynics of late-stage capitalism will come back and say, aha, you can crank more out of somebody if you can give them a prayer room. Right, fine, right? But even through the lens of if you're a person of faith, there probably is something that, in my own example, when I realized I was accountable to a far higher power, that's what drove me to be an excellent employee, and it was a win-win. So employees have needs, organizations have needs, and when we think about the faith agenda, I'll go to the next slide, which really talks about business leaders right now have committed to and understand that their role goes often beyond just bottom line. And so when we think about commitments to the expectation for people to come to work and find purpose, the idea that people come and want to find belonging, more and more people have lost that community element of their church and synagogue and mosque maybe being where they find belonging. They're coming to the workforce. If you're working for a global company, you might be in a more of a 24/7 environment where that is where your communities are. Things like resilience and well-being, this was key. When we got into COVID and recognized that people's mental health and well-being was a need that our senior leaders needed to somehow deliver, there's a real way that faith actually can help elevate that. So my point in saying that everything you see on the right-hand side of this slide are commitments that business leaders, whether they want to or not, have been expected to deliver against business priorities. And when you think about how faith at a macro level actually can be an enabler of it, we start from a different mindset in terms of how faith actually is something that can amplify and elevate business priorities, as opposed to come in right from the mindset that it's actually a polarizing or weaponizing force. It's actually something that can help achieve all of the different areas. The last one I actually will highlight is that corporate citizenship and corporate social responsibility is a big play for business. And what I've often found is the correlation between people in communities of faith who are going out and supporting volunteerism, because that's a core part of who they are and what they are, have actually been key communities that have been able to bring volunteerism and corporate citizenship to life. And then just as we think about, again, at a macro level, if we go to the next slide, what's different, however, and really key in delivering this, because people say, how does this actually work? To echo Paul's point, what's different about business, perhaps, than society is that the business still has its overarching business objectives. I always have to remind people, we are still a for-profit corporation delivering services. We are not trying to recreate churches and synagogues. That is not the intent here. And so in order to do this and do this right, there are some guiding principles, first and foremost around just really understanding that if you're leading in this space, I may be a visible Muslim, but when I'm out there advocating for faith in the workplace, whatever I do, I'm creating precedents and has to be parity across the different faiths. So when I'm lobbying for or advocating for prayer spaces or food accommodations or holiday accommodations, I am neutral in that, and I'm trying to elevate the broader faith agenda. The second point really is around respect and reciprocity, and this is a key message that we encourage for people coming to the conversation of do not impose on others what you would want on yourself. And so again, this is not about proselytizing. Most companies actually have policies against proselytizing. It's actually the opposite of that. In the same way that I want to find space to be able to live through the lens of my faith and lead and lean into what makes me who I am, I have to create the same opportunity. And that's actually a muscle that if we can get right in the corporate spaces, it's something we can take out into the broader communities. And it's a great one to kind of constantly reground people in. When we think about treatment specific, again, that goes hand in hand with the first point around I will not be advocating only for one just because of faith, and we've heard this in previous sessions. Just because you may have a predominant faith in one country, that does not become the dominating agenda for when you're talking about faith inclusion in the workplace. And then the fourth one, which is the trickiest one for people to reconcile, especially in the polarized world that we live in, there are so many attempts that people will want to take the faith inclusion priority and do the opposite of that and use it to weaponize and polarize. We're surrounded by that. So the key approach, kind of again from a macro level, is how does this help the workplace environment in employees being able to find belonging and again, psychological safety and security to be able to thrive in the work that they're doing. And so despite many attempts to be able to use faith and interfaith to try and solve for the problems of the world, we actually have to pull it back, rein it in, and say, well, how is this affecting you in the workplace? And that's a really fundamental core principle, especially, as we get into polarizing situations, election year, the Middle East, et cetera, that I've had to re-anchor people in, and even despite doing it 20 years at Accenture, reground people in these principles. I think we can probably share, what does good look like? This is your checklist, right? And I think that across all of our organizations, when people say, what is it? It's actually not public statements from CEOs. It's none of that stuff. It's actually helping people in the ways that matter the most to them in their day-to-days. And when people come to me and they say, I can't believe that I have, a place that I can, I just walked and found the prayer space here, and that actually makes a really big difference in my experience, right? Being able to go to the cafeteria and have halal kosher, knowing that my team isn't always scheduling everything around the times that don't work for me, being very cognizant around the fact that, in the winter, we should not be planning outings on Friday afternoons because you're actually marginalizing two big faith communities. So understanding just in the day-to-day operations of how to accommodate this, no different than you would for other communities that also need these accommodations. And so rather than otherizing it, building it into the core tenets of just your organizational culture. So these are kind of some good examples of what does good look like, and just, again, focusing on the workplace and how you can support your people. And I will not, during the last slide, which I think is the Accenture story, other than just to say that it actually can be a really key enabler for communication, for culture, and for connection. And despite some of the challenges that come with bringing people along for the journey, one of the most beautiful parts of what good looks like is how we've been able to really elevate how faith has been an enabler for communication, connection, and culture in bringing topics that are topical to business. For example, we've got the Gen AI conversation going. We've got topics around how to honor difference with respect, how to live out the company core values. And while the faiths are coming at it from their own lens, the thread that kind of connects all of us are the organizational core values. And it's very complementary in a way that not only allows people in the faith communities in your organizations to be able to kind of live and lean in, but it also allows the organizations to be able to fulfill that commitment in terms of living their core values and building the connections that are needed. So happy to talk. I was watching the clock, and I want to make sure that my peers have an opportunity to share their stories. But there's a lot of goodness. I do personally believe there's a lot of unlocked potential that still remains in terms of how business can truly model what great looks like, and being able to take that back out into the communities in which we live, to be able to really reframe how faith is actually a real contributing factor to society.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love Sumreen. She has been a fabulous mentor for me over this faith-based ERG journey I've been on for a really long time at Dell Technologies. Paul as well. So Sumreen set up the macro environment. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we're structurally set up and some of the lessons I've learned over this journey. So Paul, just a little bit about our ERG. Sumreen's ERG's been around 20 plus years. We are very new at Dell, not quite as new as ServiceNow, so you're getting kind of 3 different flavors of our journey. We've been in practice for 7 years. I'm one of the global co-founders. A story for another day. It took me 17 years to get to an approval process, and we've been in place for 7 years. I'm very thankful for Sumreen because a lot of the structure and things that we've set up have been around her checklist and lessons learned. So we were able to launch successfully based on a lot of best practice sharing. So in 7 years, we're about 3,300 members worldwide. We are represented in, I think, 45 countries as of now with 10 chapters. It's taken a really long time to get there. We like to say we're kind of the best kept secret at Dell. We're one of 13 employee resource groups. Much like Accenture, we started with a Women in Action group, and it kind of grew from there over time. Did you do
manicures?
We did closet organizing, actually. That was one of ours. We have 500 events over the course of a year. We have around 15,000 participants. Many come to multiple events. I will tell you all, when I started on this journey, I grew up Christian in a very isolated Christian environment. I appreciated all the other religions, but I really grew up ignorant about what the other religions were about. And I've had the privilege at Dell of setting up an interfaith ERG with 5 separate faith leads, and I'll talk a little bit about the structure in a second. But one of the core values that we have around the mission statement is we're open to everyone always. No matter what your faith or no faith, we want you to come to our events, and we want to hear your feedback, and we want to accommodate whatever is needed for you to bring your authentic self to work. We have individual events under each of the 5 faiths, so the Christians run prayer calls and Bible studies. The Muslims do the same thing. Our Hindus run our yoga series. They all have the capacity and ability to set up whatever events they want. But our faith leads that are in charge of each of the faith leads are highly encouraged to attend events that are outside of their own faith practice. I attend all of the events because, as I said, I grew up not understanding the other faiths, and that has probably been the best blessing of this ERG, is learning about everyone else. What I have found is most of the folks that attend the events come in not because they're part of the Muslim team or the Christian team, but because they have someone who they've either a family member has married or someone that their child is a best friend with, and they're seeking to understand how they can accommodate and learn from that. So that's been a great best practice. We do have 70 volunteer leaders in our organization globally. Well, I'll show you the structure in just a second. That is a lot to manage from kind of an extra credit perspective, but I will tell you one of the things we experience is volunteer fatigue, because everybody does have really big, busy jobs, and so we've had to really put some thoughtfulness around how we structure and inspire our leaders as part of that team to keep the mission going. We focus highly on volunteer events. Dell allows us to do volunteer events during the day. For every 10 hours we volunteer, we get $150 to donate to a charity of our choice. So that is one of the things that it's easy for all the faith practices to align on and do in their communities, and that's been a real big win for us. So let's go to the next slide. So structurally, this is how we're set up. There was a lot of debate when we set up initially. Did we want to have individual ERGs for each faith, or did we want to have one global interfaith umbrella? I personally highly recommend the global interfaith umbrella, council, whatever you would want to call it. Again, we have faith leads for each of the major faiths, a lead and a co-lead. They're represented across the different regions if you look at the far right. But our faith lead, strategy lead, Leah Karuba, was actually our Jewish lead for a really long time. And what we saw was a need to elevate a faith lead that was driving consistency for all the reasons Sumreen said, around accommodations, best practices, and really just sharing and building relationships across those faith leads. We vet out our faith lead leaders very thoroughly. We want to make sure that they are not isolated in their own religion and that they are open, not only open to other faiths, but very supportive of other faiths and also educated on the other faiths. So that's part of her role. She does an amazing, amazing job. And then we have a really strong structure of folks that are responsible for all of the individual things that keep our ERG running. All right. This is how we run our events. So quarterly, we do have multi-faith events, and those look very similar to what we've done today, which are we come together on a topic, loving the unlovely, what does service in your religious practice look like, the types of things that we can kind of come together on, and we sit all of our faith leads on a panel. We ask them very intentional questions about what their faith practice looks like in that particular topic, and then they each share their perspective and kind of build off of each other. We get amazing attendance in those events. We get amazing feedback from those, so we do try to do those quarterly. And then these are all of the events that we run, that the individual faith groups run, and what cadence they run those with. And the last thing that we've just developed, and probably Sumreen already had it, and we went off and created it on our own, is a faith holiday calendar, one that we've used to educate our leaders, one that we've incorporated in our diversity training, but it is an all-inclusive calendar for all of the faiths that we could possibly find, and it is an amazing piece of work. Just a fun fact story, it started with the person who actually created this, started attending our events about a year ago, and he was a very contentious atheist. It didn't feel like we were making accommodations for him in the company. We spent a lot of time just in conversations with him around figuring out how we could accommodate him best. He just started attending all of the faith-based events. He attended all of these calls, just an observer. Sometimes he would ask questions. And now, fast forward a year later, he's one of the leaders who came in and created something that is really, really impactful to the company. So that's probably one, next to being number 3 on the Ready Conference list, it's probably one of our most proudest accomplishments. And I think this is just an example of what those multi-faith discussions look like. And what kind of topics we cover. This was over World Interfaith Harmony Week. Our ERGs sponsor a week for every one of the 13 ERGs has a particular highlight week. Ours is World Interfaith Harmony Week, as you might expect. And then these are just some of the things that we hear from our members, which is basically, I don't know how I could feel connected and supported in this company without this group. So really our mission, we have 2 missions that we drive to every year. Is how do we get more members into the ERG? But really, how do we focus on making sure our members are actively engaged and that we're delivering things of value that keep them coming back and attending things? All right, with that, I think I'm turning it over to Adam.
All right. Let's see. I'm in marketing, so I have to do something marketing-ish. So first of all, I'm involved in doing customer success stories and all sorts of things like that. I have on this panel customers. And we are deeply connected in a business relationship. Does that make sense? So Accenture, they sell a lot of our product. Dell does as well as we sell products into them. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a customer of ours, as is BYU. And so it's really a great opportunity to be on a panel like this, but also to interact with them. And in fact, I would say in our journey, we're just getting to the point where we're starting to branch out and connect with a lot of other companies, and even doing events with other companies. And that's making a great impact on what we're doing at ServiceNow. So that's the marketing thing aside. So this is our people pack. So this comes from our people organization, and it's fairly simple. And on there is one thing that says, live your best life. Says do your best work and fulfill our purpose together. And so that idea of bringing your whole self to work, our CEO and leader he pounds the table. I mean, he's like one of the best coaches out there. Every time we're done with a meeting, you just feel like standing up and jumping up and down. He's like, let's go. And it's like, whoa. Anyway, he preaches that. So from his pulpit, he's like, we got to bring ourselves to work. And he will sit in meetings with us, and he will figure out different ways. Let's dream big. Let's see how we can make this thing even bigger. So when you have that type of support from the top, it's just amazing. I'll go to the next slide. But our journey has been interesting in interfaith, because when I first joined, I was told about interfaith, and I thought, I'm of that generation that you spoke of that was told never bring religion and politics into work. That is a death knell. And so it was strange when I went to work and they said, okay, there's a Christian prayer group over here, and there is this interfaith group. And I was like, ooh, do I sneak out on that one? So I joined up, and immediately they were like, oh, can you be the representative for your church in this council? And we had this big meeting at kind of a town hall where the chief marketing officer, who was our sponsor, pegged us at different religions and different beliefs, and we got to know each other and talk to the greater population of ServiceNow. And then right after that, we were told that interfaith was put on hold. I was like, what? We just had this great event, and now you're putting us on hold? And it was because they came in, DEI group came in and said, you're not organized the way we want you to be. And it's like, oh, okay. And nobody had raised their hand immediately to do that, so they put us on ice for about 6 months. But they still wanted us to do it. It's still something that they wanted to do. At first, we were a little suspicious, like, what? Maybe we can't talk about faith here at work. But then came back around, and they were looking for volunteers. And immediately I raised my hand because I wanted to be a part of that. And so getting involved, we only had a few leadership members. And I should probably mention here, we put together a kind of a mission statement. And so we built it around be, do, have with purpose, which means be, what are our values? And we aligned those values with that people pact and with general things that we operate from, like being hungry and humble and win as a team, those type of things. So we wanted to make sure we had alignment. And then we also had the be, do, have. The do is the mission. What are we going to do as a group? And then the have, what is our vision? What are we going to have? And then what is our greatest purpose? And so we always go back to that. And this is just kind of a short abbreviation of what that was. So we always go back and make sure we're aligned. And now as we're getting to the point where we're starting to look at those individual faith groups, and that's what I've been tasked with doing now that I've stepped down from the co-chair, is to help organize that. And so now we're looking at how can they build their mission statements so they align. So we have alignment in our company. You have to have alignment. Doesn't matter whether it's on whatever purpose, but as a business you really have to have that alignment. To the next one. I only bring up this is our organization. We've been around for about 4 years, a little over 4 years. And that's counting the 6 months on hiatus. So, but the one thing I want to point out here is that this last time when we went around to say who's going to volunteer, we had more volunteers than we had positions, which had not happened before. So we knew that was one of the greatest, that was one of the silent things that I was like most proud of, is we've reached this point where people want to be involved. And that was very important. One of the other bigger ones from a business standpoint was making the Ready Index and being on that. And being a Fortune 500 company and being able to make that list. And that's what the company was most proud of. They wanted to put that out there and tell everybody, hey, we are a faith-based, I mean, not a faith-based company, but a faith-friendly company. So this, I just want to bring up the fact that some of the activities that we were involved in, at least in the last year, we were involved with multiple companies on the Jewish Holocaust. And we also did a fasting as a group in Ramadan. And we're planning on doing another one where we do Bring Your Faith to Work Week, where we do something with one of our team members for Ganesh and Hindu. And so we try to pick individual religions that we highlight, and then we all try to participate and make sure that we're there for them. This here is from our good friend here. He came in and did several sessions where he was teaching us what are the best practices. And it's really led us to do a lot of things a little bit different and tweak a few things and just realize that you can talk about religion and faith and work. And the last thing I'd leave you with is one of the things that we did at the very first was we did what we called open mic sessions. And so the idea was we said we don't really want to hear about, what you believe as much as your experience in your belief. And so we gave a topic and we had open mic sessions, and some of them were just amazing. I mean, they wanted to give us the thing that you're going to come to tears if you join Interfaith. And it's like, yeah, you're right. We had one fellow who was a secularist, and he took pride in demolishing other people's faith. And at some point he turned that around and decided, I don't want to do that anymore. And so one of the first things he did was join Interfaith. And honestly, that when he talked at the open mic, we were all in tears. So it is amazing to learn from all the different faiths. It is amazing to learn and have a connection of heart and mind. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you to all three of you for that. I'm going to give you a minute now to think of the question you want to ask. I have some questions that I can ask, but I want to give that opportunity to you. But I'll just say this to give me maybe some. So we heard from Sumreen kind of the macro, why this is even a thing. Then we've heard from Shawn and Adam about what this can look like in an organization. I want you to consider just for a moment the difference between a worker that comes to work every day to punch in and punch out and get a paycheck. And they're counting the minutes, right? Or they're counting if they're salary employers, they're just counting what's the minimum I can do to get my salary. As opposed to someone that feels empowered to come to work and say, my work, whether I'm making computers, whether I'm providing a service, whatever it is, my work is honoring who I am. It's an expression or an extension of who I am, of my values, of my dedication to my God. Which employee do you want, right? We want the employee, I want to hire the employee that comes to work ready to honor their God through their work, not to get a paycheck simply, because they're going to be better workers and we're going to be a better company for it. So let me turn to you. Who has a question that we can ask of the panel here? Yes?
I have a very practical question that's kind of about time at work. Is when did these events, these open mics, these remembrances, these dialogues, when do they actually happen in the work day, the work week, and the work year?
Ours happen all the time during the work day. I mean, we have Bible study on Friday morning. We have prayer calls during the day. We have afternoon. Our Muslim team hosts afternoon prayer sessions. All of ours are accommodated during the work day. They do get together after hours, but it's part of our commitment.
Yeah, I think it's also worth saying that all of this is opt-in, and it also is required that anyone can join. So even though you have faith communities, we are not allowed to limit them to only people of that faith. And so to the extent that it's opt-in and someone can come and learn, they're also doing it when you're in consulting, they're carving that time out because it's a priority for them. So
I was just going to say during the business day, and that means a lot for your employees.
And right, inherent in that question is, well, what about the productivity lost? And the reality is you're gaining. And the data is pretty clear on that. If people can feel empowered they're just better. I mean, you're actually losing productivity by not building these kind of things into the as options in the workforce.
And I would tell you, I saw a transformation in the atheist person example that I gave, because he was angry at the company, he was angry at life in general, he was definitely angry at Interfaith, and we really rallied around him to try to model what loving someone looked like. And he is just a different person as an employee and as a neighbor and as a community member.
You can also consider this as part of wellness, and so many organizations have wellness programs, and so this is part of that wellness program.
Other questions? Yes, Mark.
Has this been growing like through HR groups, interactions with each other, through business schools, or company to company? I assume this has been growing and spreading between companies, but perhaps some companies are saying, no, I'm not really, their company's not interested in doing this. Or
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few OGs, Texas Instruments, and some that have been doing this since the 90s. You saw a real surge kick in as a reaction to the geopolitical situation here in the 2016-2017 time. And then after October, there was another big surge, and it was another reaction. However, I would go back to Shawn's point of you don't want to react to political situations and form your groups. It's actually intended to be more of an internal culture one. So being very intentional that when you see a surge, kind of understanding what the motivation is, and then going back to the basic of the interfaith muscle you're trying to build, that's from a work standpoint. So I can pinpoint the exact moments in time where you saw a surge around this stuff. I would still argue that we're just scratching the surface on what's in the realm of possibility. So.
And one other thing Paul and the RFBF do is connect us as companies. So we all act as advocates and consultants for any company that's interested in setting up an ERG. I spend a lot of my time on phone calls with people who are experiencing roadblocks or growing pains and sharing our lessons learned.
Just to put one data point on that, it's true, we have a long ways to go. But just in the last 2.5 years, we've seen, among Fortune 500s, which is an easy group for us to look at, among Fortune 500s, we've seen from 40% to 84% in the last 2.5 years that now include religion in their diversity initiatives.
Wow. Yeah.
Why don't we get actually 2 questions at the same time? So we'll go here and over here.
So should I ask 2 questions?
3 questions.
So one question is who are the advocates out there besides you as employees of certain companies, like Brian Grimm? Are there more Brian Grimms out there in the world? Are you guys the only advocates around? And the second question, if you don't mind, what abuses have you seen in the system in the sense of people using it as an excuse to either individuals or companies to use it as an excuse for being the ESG kind of advocacy?
Yeah. Do we want to grab the other?
Yeah, let's grab the other question and then we'll.
I know we're getting low on time, so if you need to skip my question, I understand. But in terms of a practical standpoint, especially for smaller companies who are not Fortune 500, there's a lot of different dynamics. And so could you just give us a few practical pointers on where does a smaller company start this dialogue? What can we do?
I'll start with your question last in terms of let's not overcomplicate this. The ways in which things matter the most to our people actually are in the when you first start a new project, what are the ways in which all of your team members might need to be accommodated. That's just a sign of a good leader. In some cases, it might require some flexible scheduling. In some cases, somebody needs a better keyboard because they have carpal tunnel. I mean, I just roll it in, right, in terms of then it's not this big political debate. It's actually how do you support your team and help them as a, and so that inclusive checklist that I had is, if someone needs to take a 15-minute smoke break, which was used to be the thing, is they might need to take a 15-minute prayer break, right? And that's not a big deal in the big scheme. So I would say, look at what your employee needs are and treat them kind of on the same parity as you might accommodate other things. So that's a very easy way to do it. The other really easy way to do is, like I say, low-hanging fruit, right, is celebrate faith holidays. No one is going to yell at you if you bring sweets out for Diwali. I mean, I'm just saying, right? And yet you have an entire community that now feels seen. And even in a small company, right? So expand the horizons of the multicultural faith holiday schedule like put it in your newsletter and just say, we just want to celebrate, and here's how you might accommodate your employee. They might be fasting for 10 hours and, that kind of stuff. It's just, don't overcomplicate it. Just think about what makes it for a meaningful experience and work. I want to take your second question, but I'll let other people.
No, go ahead.
No, the second question about how have people abused it. People will abuse it. They will use it. It happens all the time. So I always say that when you venture into this space, go in very clear about what your objectives are within the context of the business framework, because at the end of the day, that's what the company is going to stay aligned with. And ground yourself in the organizational core values, because regardless of how an individual or a group might want to abuse it, that's how you rein it back in. It has happened, it will happen, but I often find myself, even 20 years in, reminding people that it's not about proselytizing. We have policies against that. Those are policies that would apply regardless of whether you had interfaith or not. But rather than focusing on all the wrongs, it's actually focus on the rights of what good looks like. And I often, and have more so in the recent days, of focus on how there's alignment to achieving the organizational core values, because that's less than of abuse and more of an elevation point. Emotional intelligence of the people who are leading in this space cannot be underrepresented. When she said that you vet your leaders in this space, that's a really critical part. And so you're vetting it from the get-go to say that this person truly is coming in and wants to contribute to the culture of the organization, no matter how big or small. But you've got a litmus test for that emotional intelligence of somebody in terms of what the motivations are, and to make sure that they're aligned. That's a really important point.
And that really served us well during the October events, because our faith leads were able to have those really difficult, ugly conversations across the faith group. They attended each of their faith group calls and answered the really difficult questions and acknowledged everyone's feelings. And we had not have been prepared for that if we had not been a 7-year mature organization and thoroughly vetted those leaders, I'm sure. And I'm happy to send you the faith-based calendar so you can have lots of celebrations back there in your company.
Super easy. Like I said, no one's going to yell at you when you
They will
celebrate
not.
a holiday.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we could share as well. Each one of our faith pillars have a fact sheet that aligns to, it educates not only just on what the faith beliefs are, but what their holidays are, and then how leaders or team members could support their colleagues in the workplace, specifically with religious accommodations. And that's really, really helpful for our leadership team.
So as a person of faith, you often think that God has, he knows what's going on. He has his own timeline, and things will happen in a certain way. And so we think that, but obviously if we're attuned to certain things, we can see that there are maybe difficult problems in the workplace. We can see where those things may be helped by faith, and show that no matter what we're doing, we're always trying to improve the business along with that. And so anytime that we try to align, like I mentioned, alignment with those things, with what the business is trying to do, and that's why I started with saying this connection between customers and the business side of things is just as important as anything that we do to the business. But personally, it's super important for us to see a greater picture. And if we do, then faith will grow. It just always does.
So we're out of time. We'll take more questions certainly if you want to come up. But just to answer the one question, are there other folks? So certainly the Religious Freedom Business Foundation is a leader in this. Interfaith America has some content focused on this. The Wheatley Institute does some work on this. The Marriott School of Business is a good resource. They're a growing resource in this, and others. I'd say if you have any questions about any of this, come talk to us or email us at any time. We want to help. So thank you, panelists, for your expertise. And thank you.